Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Motley Fool Conversations. I'm Motley Fool analyst Rachel Warren, and today I'm excited to welcome Steve Harshbarger, CEO and president of Sono-Tek, to the show. Steve has over 30 years of experience in ultrasonic coating equipment for the electronics, medical device, and advanced energy industries. He joined Sono-Tek in 1993, was appointed president of the company in 2012, elected a director in 2013, and in 2020 assumed the chief operating officer position as well. In his years managing the company's sales organization, Steve established a worldwide distribution and representative network in more than 40 countries, consisting of more than 300 people, and contributed to revenue growth of greater than 400%. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, Rachel.
Well, I want to start by kind of setting the table for our conversation here. Maybe for those in our audience who are just hearing about Sono-Tek for the first time, could you walk us through a brief history of the business, its journey, and where the company is now?
Sure, be happy to do so. Now, Sono-Tek was just this past year. We celebrated our 50th year anniversary, and the company was founded by Dr. Harvey Berger, who was the inventor of the ultrasonic nozzle technology, which still to this day is the heart of what we're selling today. And Dr. Berger was really a technologist and an innovator at heart. And he built the company around the development of this high-tech ultrasonic atomizing nozzle. And the nozzles are about the size, say, of a baseball. And these ultrasonic nozzles produce very small, controlled, micron-size liquid droplets. And the droplets are very close to the same size. And by changing the frequency of the nozzle, we can very precisely control making the droplets smaller or larger. These atomization kits that Dr. Berger invented were very unique, and they were primarily used in laboratories and R&D environments, and sold mainly, I would say, to universities doing research projects. And over time, it became very clear that the underlying ultrasonic technology had some very unique capabilities around precision, uniformity, material control, and the application of very thin coatings and thin films that were advantageous in particular to high-tech manufacturing needs. And over the years, Sono-Tek has really evolved from providing these very small, relatively small atomization kits that sold for, well, maybe $5,000 to say $10,000, into a company now that's focused on very large, sophisticated coating platforms and integrated manufacturing platforms that sell for, say, $100,000 to, in many cases, well over $1 million now. So today we provide highly engineered coating platforms that still have, at the heart of every system, that same ultrasonic nozzle technology, but it's integrated with automation, robotics, precision motion control, software, and very importantly, advanced application engineering expertise. And these systems are used to apply highly precise thin film coatings, and they're into some of the world's most advanced manufacturing sectors, including areas like medical devices, semiconductors, clean energy sectors, and advanced microelectronics. And importantly, we really position the company around high value applications where the coating performance is really truly mission critical.
Well, and that's what I wanted to dig into as well, a little bit more. I mean, you walked us through how the company's evolved from selling nozzles, into this global leader in automated full-scale industrial coating platforms, and these turnkey solutions that come at a very high value and have a lot of really key applications in a lot of the biggest markets that we see today. So I wonder how this shift. How has that fundamentally changed the company's internal culture, the sales cycle? Maybe you can walk us through that a bit.
Sure. Um, well, I would say what really has become clear through the underlying ultrasonic technology capabilities was that the precision uniformity and material control were much better and suited for like these super high advanced technology industries where coating performance really matters. And that has led the company into markets like these medical devices, semiconductor and clean energy and microelectronics, where the value and the benefit we bring to the products we're coating is far more significant, say, than the cost of the equipment itself. And that has really fundamentally changed the shift and changes the business. Years ago, our customers were buying, again, these relatively small R&D tools with almost no customization. Today our customers' engagements are much deeper and often involve much longer development cycles, where our engineering teams, they really work directly with the customers on highly specialized coating processes. And internally, and that's forced us to where we've added significantly more systems engineering, automation capabilities, software integration, and application engineering expertise. And we've become much more, I would describe it as solutions oriented versus simply, say, product oriented. And due to this, the sales cycle is, of course, naturally longer. But the customer relationship also becomes really much deeper because we're really helping our customers to develop and commercialize complete manufacturing processes rather than just selling these simple pieces of equipment.
Well, another thing that I have found really interesting is how Sono-Tek has been bringing more manufacturing in-house as of late. And I think that's something that it really speaks a lot to the business's growth story. So obviously, beyond, saving money, how does bringing more of that manufacturing in-house speed up your R&D cycles? How is that carrying down to the business overall?
Yeah, interestingly. Yeah, honestly, I guess the cost savings really are probably one of the smaller benefits, in my opinion. The much bigger advantage is really speed and flexibility. Our systems, as they become more customized and technically sophisticated, rapid iterations become important. When engineering from our teams can work directly with our machine shops, say, and they can prototype quickly, they can make modifications immediately, and they can really test rapidly. It really compresses that development cycle significantly. And also, it creates a much tighter feedback loop between the engineering and manufacturing, which really improves both the product development and the responsiveness to our customers. A lot of the systems we build today are highly application specific. So having more internal capabilities allows us really to react much faster as customer requirements start to evolve.
I'm curious. I wonder what maybe one or two things are that perhaps some investors might not understand about the complexities of the precision coating industry that you could share, because obviously, Sono-Tek works with clients across a wide range of really key industries, which we will talk about here in a minute. But I would imagine there are some very specific complexities to this space that might not be obvious at first glance.
That's a true statement. Um, from an investor standpoint, it's easy, I think, for them not to recognize how complex these thin film coatings are. I mean, you're talking about coatings that are in the nano or micron thin layers that are really vital. So just little teeny shifts in the coating quality can make significant differences. And in some of the sectors that we're involved in, even say a 5% shift of the coating quality can make this huge impact where the customer can start to have something that is considered a defect versus acceptable. And in some industries, that's not so important, but in many of our high-tech industries, that's really vitally important. It can mean throwing away a semiconductor wafer that's maybe worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even in the medical industry, much more critical. It can mean getting a good stent or a drug-eluting balloon that's not quite performing properly. And a defect there, of course, you're talking about a human's life and their operation. So the coding quality rises to such an extreme level of high importance, and the cost becomes much less important when you're talking about these sort of critical applications like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful information. I want to dive into the electronics side of the business, the semiconductor side of the business. Sono-Tek provides advanced ultrasonic coating systems for semiconductor chips or wafers, obviously specializing in uniform, precise, low velocity application of coatings. With semiconductor nodes getting smaller, maybe you can talk a bit more how these technologies are evolving to meet those precision requirements, and also just talk a bit more about your growth within the semiconductor space broadly.
Sure. I would say as semiconductor devices continue becoming more small and complex, the process requirements definitely become significantly tighter. One of the advantages of ultrasonic spray is the ability to generate extremely uniform, tight drop distribution droplets, which becomes increasingly important when we're working with very thin films and complex topography on these semiconductor wafers. But the evolution is really happening really across the entire manufacturing platform. It's really not just on the nozzle itself. So we continue to improve things like the liquid flow control, a lot of real-time software monitoring and process controls, and we're advancing our automation significantly. And in our overall system precision to support tighter tolerance and I would say greater repeatability is becoming super important for us. As well, material efficiency is also becoming increasingly importantly, especially some of these very expensive semiconductor materials, where material waste is starting to be meaningful, and it really can create some significant value. And as the advanced packaging continues growing, I really believe there's going to be significant opportunities where ultrasonic coating can offer other advantages, over more conventional approaches, particularly in applications involving difficult surfaces or highly specialized nanomaterial coatings in particular.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch the industry develop. Something else that I wanted to ask about, we're seeing this shift from the 200 millimeter high tech lab environments towards the 300 fab directed environments. And I'm curious, however many years, 3 to 5 years from now, do you view Sono-Tek will still be, a very specialized R&D partner, or do you think it'll be moving towards more high volume production, tier one, supplying to global fabs? How do you view that potential evolution?
Yeah, it's a good question. You see so much on the news about that today, especially in the U.S. Um, you know, the R&D process and development, it will always remain really strategically important to Sono-Tek because that's, where our customer relationship begins. And it's where many of our 200 millimeter customers in that marketplace are really focused. And that early stage engagement, I would describe it as, often positions us well as those technologies mature more towards production and pilot line system environments. But at Sono-Tek, we're absolutely seeing a significant larger percentage of our opportunities moving towards production coding environments, particularly in areas like advanced packaging and high value semiconductor applications. And that's been the driving and recent focus of our 300 millimeter fab engagement in environments that we've been looking at. So with that said, we also though clearly recognize that some of these larger suppliers in the semiconductor industry, they're really very, very deeply entrenched, especially in the highest volume production levels. But we believe our technology has some very unique capabilities, particularly around thin film material efficiency and complex topographies on the wafers. And that should allow the door to crack open for us with additional opportunities, either directly or potentially even through some strategic partnerships. So I do think the company is increasingly becoming viewed more as a production manufacturing partner, rather than an R&D equipment supplier, which is where we historically have been very strong.
I'm curious, as Sono-Tek is increasingly becoming this key production partner for the semiconductor sector, are there any major technological or supply chain challenges that are or could arise, and how do you plan to address those?
Yeah, that was a big issue several years ago, of course. The semiconductor industry, it moves, of course, incredibly fast,
Hmm.
and especially in the newer next-gen applications. And I would say one of the biggest challenges that we're often facing with our customers that are trying to commercialize technology on very aggressive timelines, and in many of those cases, they don't really fully know what the final manufacturing process should even be like and what it looks like. So, quite honestly, sometimes neither side has all the answers yet because the technology itself is still what I would describe as evolving. So, a big part of our role, the Sono-Tek role, is being flexible and collaborative and to help accelerate the customer's development cycle time. And that's very different, say, than the supporting a mature manufacturing process where everything is already fully defined and standardized. Uh, you know, it requires, I would describe as some really strong application engineering expertise, some rapid iteration capability, and very close interaction between our team and the customer's engineering team. And back to your original question, from the supply chain standpoint, though, things have actually stabilized quite a bit compared to a few years back for us. So today, really, the bigger challenge from our standpoint is really helping customers to navigate the rapidly evolving technology requirements while maintaining precision and repeatability of our equipment.
One of the things I wanted to dig into a bit further is Sono-Tek's investment in automation. I know that's something you've brought up a couple times, and I'd like to hear a little bit more detail on what that's looked like, how that automation strategy has really developed over the last few years.
Gotcha. Yeah, we have, you know, we've dove deep, really deep in automation, both in the manufacturing side of the company and the equipment that we're using to make our machinery. We've invested very significantly there, both in efficiencies, but in equipment that makes our precision of the machines we're delivering higher. But we've invested as well very deeply into the automation of the parts handling aspects of the company. Um, you know, every one of our customers that are coming to us, and again, these are some of the largest high-tech manufacturing companies in the world today, they all have these very unique products and unique automation requirements to handle and manipulate their products that are being delivered to us. Um, so we've had to invest significantly in the engineering expertise to manage that automation internally and made very big investments there as well as big investments into the software side of managing that automation. But that's been quite successful for us. And the big jump for us now was the how to make automation that keeps up with the production speed requirements of the high volume manufacturing operations that we're now being deployed into. Again, that's been a very significant shift for us that has taken some time to bring that expertise in house, but worked quite successfully for us.
Yeah, thank you for walking me through that. I want to pivot to talk about the medical device segment for Sono-Tek. I mean, this is a part of the business that has been really witnessing superior growth, particularly in balloon catheters. I wonder if you can maybe talk our audience through what the drivers are here. Do you see this as a structural shift in how these devices are manufactured? What are the growth tailwinds for this segment?
Sure. I think there are a few important drivers behind that growth. Um, Part of it is really the continued evolution towards more advanced, minimally invasive devices and drug delivery technologies, just in general. And specifically within the vascular applications, there's been a shift in many producers from traditional metal stents, which we also coat at Sono-Tek, towards drug-eluting balloons, or what they refer to them as DEBs, which are inserted just temporarily into the body during a procedure, and they don't leave then that metal device behind in your body. In both of these applications, coating uniformity, repeatability, and material control of these drugs is really important to device performance. And importantly, I believe we've really gotten on the ground floor with several of these DEB manufacturers as their technologies have been scaling and moving towards broader commercialization. So I think this is definitely more of a long-term structural trend rather more than a short-term cycle trend.
Your technology is also essential for hydrogen electrolyzers, the green energy space. And of course, I think one question that comes to mind is there some cyclicality to that business, sort of tied to the ebb and flow of factors like green energy subsidies? But maybe you can talk a bit more about the clean energy business and what that growth story is looking like.
Yeah, that's been a hot topic for a lot of companies these days. And I think it's fair to acknowledge that, parts of the clean energy market are very significantly influenced by government policies and initiatives. So the market, it can absolutely become somewhat lumpy depending upon which administration is in the office and how funding priorities shift. But overall, I still believe the long-term direction will continue moving forward. You know, to me personally, a big part of this is really about long-term energy independence and energy security, right? Continue countries right now globally, they're continuing to invest in technologies that diversify energy sources, improve efficiency, and very importantly, strengthen domestic manufacturing capabilities. And Sono-Tek's advanced energy exposure is really broader than just the hydrogen area, I should note. Thin film solar, for example, has actually been a very significant part of our advanced energy business over recent years. And that's in addition to the hydrogen related applications like for fuel cells and electrolyzers. And our role, I look at it as really an enabling manufacturing technology partner. We support applications where coding precision, material efficiency, and process consistency are really critically important. And as I mentioned earlier, we also benefit from the diversification across multiple advanced technology markets from a Sono-Tek perspective. Again, including like the medical area, semiconductor, microelectronics. So the company is really not dependent on any single clean energy cycle per se.
Well, and talking about all these different drivers of the business, from clean energy to medical devices, semiconductors, microelectronics, and the list goes on. Obviously, there are a lot of fast growing pillars here to your business. But if you look ahead a few years from now, do you see one of these becoming a dominant majority of the business? Or do you think that you'll probably remain pretty well diversified where that's concerned?
Yeah, I guess when I look at clean energy, medical devices, electronics, I think they're all will remain very attractive long-term opportunities for us. But I also think it's important to be realistic. As I mentioned, clean energy could be accelerated dramatically, or certainly parts of it could move much slower. And that's really depending on policy, economics, and broader market adoption. And to some extent, a lot of those things are outside of Sono-Tek control. So we'd really rather focus much more on what is within our control, and that's continue building strong technology, strong customer relationship, maintaining strong diversification across these advanced technology sectors. And I actually, view that diversification as one of our core strengths of the company. It allows us to participate in several long-term growth trends, across many markets, including the medical, semiconductor, microelectronics, advanced energy, all without being overly dependent on any single market cycle. So rather than trying to predict one dominant segment, our strategy is really to continue positioning the company where precision coding becomes increasingly important across multiple sectors and industries.
Hmm. Something also that you mentioned earlier as you were kind of talking about the complexity of Sono-Tek's precision coding technologies was how even if the coding is just slightly off, really the real world implications that can have for a client. So I wonder if maybe you can walk us through an example of how, say, the downstream failure caused by a coding being 5% off. How does that, justify the $1 million often price tag of your systems, and how does that really play into the economics of the business?
Yeah. As I touched on earlier, for many of the applications we support, even very small coding inconsistencies can create very large downstream consequences.
Hmm.
You know, Semiconductors are a really prime example of that. But I think our medical markets is really the one that really drives home the most to me,
Hmm.
because the stakes become even much higher. Like if you're coding a drug-eluting balloon, again, you're not just talking about a manufacturing issue. You're talking about patients' outcomes of a medical procedure. So in general, for a lot of our applications, our customers are not really evaluating our equipment based on the price. They're really evaluating the cost of the process consistency, the yield cost, the product reliability, and in some cases, even the clinical performance, right? So when viewed from that lens, investing in highly repeatable and reliable coding systems becomes much more easy to justify from an economical standpoint. And that's one reason why our application engineering process knowledge and long-term reliability becomes really so important in many of our industries.
And I want to talk more about that application engineering process and lab. I mean, that's something that the company highlights a lot as a really key differentiator. Maybe you can walk us through how that is really integral in locking in long-term customers, as well as just as its importance to the overall growth story.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Our application engineering labs are probably one of the most strategically important parts of the company, really. In many cases, customers initially come to us and they're really not looking to buy equipment, but they're looking more to solve a difficult coding or manufacturing challenge, I would describe it as. And these labs allow customers to test feasibility. They'll optimize the process parameters. They'll often evaluate different materials, and they'll develop scalable coding processes really before committing to large production investments. So that early collaboration really creates a very deep technical relationship, for example, because our engineers are working really side by side with our customers and their development teams. And once a process is successfully developed and validated, there's a natural path, right, towards pilot systems and production systems, and then future expansion opportunities. So the lab is much more than, say, a demonstration facility. It's really an entry point. You look at it as for a long-term relationship and future manufacturing programs.
Well, and once a system is sold or installed for a client, what is the point of friction that prevents them from switching to a competitor? What are those built-in switching costs?
Yeah, I would say once the coding process is fully developed, and validated and integrated into production, switching definitely becomes very difficult and expensive.
Right.
And that's certainly why we work really hard to get in on the ground floor whenever possible. I guess in any industry, customers would potentially need to requalify the process, repeat development work, and really they're accepting meaningful production and yield risk during any kind of transition, right? And in some industries, like the medical one we talked about earlier, the barriers really become much higher because of the long and very expensive FDA approvals and validation process tied to the manufacturing processes of these itself. So there's also this tremendous amount of, I would describe, process knowledge that develops over time between our Sono-Tek team and the customer's engineering group, where we really become a collaborative team working together with our customer. So customers, aren't usually looking to make changes unless there's a very compelling reason to do so. You're really locked in with them for a long-term relationship.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the industrial glass business. I know it's a smaller portion of the business, but there's obviously been some competitive headwinds there, specifically due to domestic Chinese producers. So I wonder if you could talk about the strategy for regaining ground, or are you maybe pivoting away to focus on higher margin sectors?
Yeah, I mean, I think the industrial glass market has certainly become more competitive over time. particularly from low-cost overseas suppliers, as you mentioned. And generally speaking, as older, fully developed glass coating applications, they mature, say, over a 10 to 15-year period, they tend to become less of a strategic focus for us, most certainly. Our strengths at Sono-Tek are usually better aligned with newer advanced technology applications, where process development, precision, application engineering, and the manufacturing performance matters much more than simply getting to lower cost. And that kind of naturally aligns better with medical devices, semiconductor, microelectronics, advanced energy, and also, though, importantly, for newer advanced glass applications, areas like next-gen displays or advanced lenses you may use on your glasses you wear in your head. So with that said, we absolutely continue participating in some of these mature glass markets as well. But our long-term growth investments, are increasingly focused on areas where our technology and our engineering capabilities create stronger differentiation and really greater long-term value.
Well, I want to pivot to talk a bit about the financials. I think one of the things that's really impressive about this business for anyone that really analyzes the financials briefly is how robust they are. I mean, you recently reached a record $20 million revenue runway rate. What does the infrastructure look like to double that to 40 million? And maybe you can talk us through that a bit.
Yeah, sure. One of our advantages of our current position is that we've been intentionally building infrastructure ahead of our revenue growth. We actually purchased our entire industrial park, and that was done very strategically to accommodate long-term expansion plans. And over the years, we've grown from occupying a single building from our industrial park, and we're now utilizing 4 of the 5 buildings within the park.
Wow.
And we also have a multi-phase expansion plan to continue. The next phase, actually, we just had a meeting on this just recently, will likely begin this calendar year, and it involves expanding and optimizing the manufacturing capabilities within our existing 4 buildings that we occupy. And that includes quite a bit of improving workflow and utilizing some of the vertical space that we have in implementing some mezzanine structures within our buildings. And right now, today, we believe the current infrastructure can support about $25 to $27 million in annual manufacturing capabilities. But with this next phase that we're planning to start this year, that should get us up to around 30 to 35 million. And then the final phase would involve eventually taking over that 5th building, which is currently under a short-term lease and owned by Sono-Tek. We're renting out, but a short-term lease. And we believe that final phase could ultimately support approximately $43 to $45 million in manufacturing capacity. So, we've been very deliberate about building scalable infrastructure ahead of our growth curve rather than reacting to it after the fact.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, the other thing I think as well that stuck out is, the zero debt profile of Sono-Tek. That's something that's quite rare in your industry and something that I think is particularly impressive for a business as it's scaling this rapidly. What has kind of been the mindset behind that to focus on that, no outstanding debt on the balance sheet rather than, say, using leverage to scale faster?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. We've chosen to operate conservatively because it really provides strategic flexibility and stability for us. Our markets can sometimes be project driven and somewhat cyclical. So maintaining a really strong balance sheet has always been important to us. And it importantly can be important to many of our larger customers to see that strong balance sheet, especially for a company that's sort of mid-sized like us. So having no debt allows us to continue investing through difficult periods, pursue long-term opportunities, and make strategic decisions without the financial pressure, I would say. And I also think some of that discipline comes from the company's history. Early in the company's life, resources were much tighter, and that created culture of being thoughtful about risk capital allocation and our long-term stability. But importantly, that doesn't mean we're not unwilling to invest in growth. That we absolutely are, but we prefer growth from a position of financial strength and discipline, rather than relying, say, on heavy leverage.
Another thing I wanted to ask about as well, I mean, just due to the high value nature of your systems, even say one or two large order delays can swing some of the quarterly numbers. So for retail investors that are listening, watching the business, what metrics should we be watching to really survey the true health of the business over the long run?
It's a good question. I really think it's a natural evolution of where our customers are going. Many technologies that originally began in our laboratories with our customers, and were developed 10 to 20 years ago, have now eventually moved toward scaled commercialization of full production. And as that happened, customers increasingly need fully integrated manufacturing platforms that provide repeatable automation and process control. So our large production-oriented systems are really an extension of the process development work we've historically done with the customers over the past decade or two. So, for example, and strategically, these larger integrated platforms allow us to participate more deeply in customers' long-term manufacturing roadmaps than simply a standalone coding tool would, for example. So I would say that's probably the best way to look at it for our capital decisions there.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I want to spend a little time talking about just the global market conditions in which Sono-Tek is operating, as well as the outlook for the business. And we've talked about the various sectors in which the business operates, right? Whether it's green energy or medical tech or semiconductors. But I'm curious what you think has changed in the global manufacturing landscape or is changing that makes your technology the must-have solution for the coming decades.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah. I think a big part is the continued development of nanotechnology chemistries and advanced materials. Thin film coatings now today are being used in applications that were never even really considered possible years ago. Products are becoming smaller, they're becoming more complex, and increasingly performance driven. So whether it's a semiconductor, medical device, an advanced battery, hydrogen, advanced thin film solars, manufacturers are being asked to deliver tighter tolerances, better uniformity, higher repeatability, and very importantly, greater material efficiencies. And at the same time, many of these materials being used today are extremely expensive. So process control and material utilization becomes very economically important. So those trends tend to align very well with the strengths of ultrasonic technology and the broader integrated coating platforms that we've been building over these recent years.
Well, and you've seen massive growth in numerous markets, Asia, of course, being one of them, even though North America remains the core base. But I wonder 5 or more years from now, how different do you think your global footprint will look? Is there a specific region that you think will be the primary engine driving that growth?
Well, I think, Asia and Europe, they're going to both continue to be very important markets for us because of the concentration. There is quite a bit of advanced manufacturing activity in both of those areas. But at the same time, we are clearly seeing increased reshoring and domestic manufacturing investments in North America, especially around the semiconductor medical device area and advanced thin film solar applications. But overall, we really view the world globally as a company. Most of our customers, there are multinational companies, and they have advanced manufacturing operations today in many areas around the world. Across multiple regions. So rather than viewing growth as an isolated to one, say, specific geographic area, I think we are benefiting from more of a broader global trend towards advanced manufacturing, supply chain diversification per se, and localization.
Well, I also want to talk about some questions related to shareholder value. Our audience are primarily retail investors. One of the
Hmm.
things that has stuck out to me is the very high level of insider ownership at Sono-Tek, and there's a very long tenured management team. And I wonder how this kind of skin in the game influence has influenced your long term capital allocation decisions, maybe compared to a typical company of your size.
Yeah, good question. Of course, high insider ownership, naturally encourages long-term thinking, right?
Right.
All you need to look at our balance sheet at Sono-Tek to see that management decisions are really made with a strong focus on, sustainable value creation rather than short-term financial engineering to try to optimize it, say, for a single quarter. Um, you know, because many of our management team are shareholders ourselves,
Mhm.
we really tend to think carefully about risk, capital allocation, maintaining profitability, very, very important to us, and protecting the long-term health of the business, I would say. I also think that the long tenure of the management team creates a very strong, say, understanding of both the opportunities and the cyclical risks that can exist in advanced manufacturing markets. So, I guess overall, I believe it encourages a more disciplined and long-term approach to building the company.
We've talked about the roadmap to growing revenue for the business, right? But I want to talk about the quality of that growth. So, as you scale, how are you protecting operating margins against inflationary pressures? What maybe are specific milestones that shareholders should look for as it pertains to the profitability trajectory?
Yeah, I think we're going to start to see the profitability trajectory start to become very attractive to customers, or to our shareholders, I should say, you know, that we're starting to reach this critical point of leverage starting to occur. And I think in our coming years, we'll start to see that really start to show in profitability. And we've always had a model where we could have easily at any point made a strategic decision to show much more profits
Mm.
and invest less into our future development programs. Um, but that's been a very thoughtful process for us to say, listen, that we would much rather sacrifice profits to grow the company long term. And but that is starting to reach a point where we're able to show both. I think we're going to be able to, in the coming years, start to show more profits with the growth impacted as well. So I think we'll start to see a little bit more balance in there as far as profitability focus in combination with growth focus, where historically we've been more growth focused while staying profitable, I would say.
For investors who had maybe never heard of Sono-Tek up until now, what would you want them to know about why this is an important moment in the company's growth story?
Mm. Um, I think, when I look back on it, I think a successful outcome in our growth story would be the continuing evolution of Sono-Tek into a much larger and more deeply integrated advanced manufacturing technology company. You know, over the past decade, we've steadily moved from smaller standalone coding tools towards these highly integrated manufacturing platforms supported by some of the world's most advanced technologies. And I'd really like to see that continue. Most of the technologies we support will make a very big impact to improve these areas that we're involved in, like healthcare, energy efficiency, enabling next generation electronics, and supporting advanced manufacturing capabilities. And these are really, critical to the global economy. And of course, ultimately the goal is to continue building long-term shareholder value, right, through innovation and profitability and disciplined growth. But beyond that, the business itself, I honestly want to see this company making meaningful impact on the world that we live in today.
Well, and that leads me to my last question. For a long-term shareholder looking at Sono-Tek 5 to 10 years from now, what would you define as a successful outcome for the company, and what's your primary focus to deliver that value?
Yeah, um, I would say the long-term impact is um, making a huge impact on the world that we live today. Sonotech may not be the name that you're going to see on a product that reaches the consumer. As a matter of fact, it most likely won't be the name of the product that you're going to reach the consumer. But I would like to see Sonotech participate in the coatings that are being applied to almost every major high tech company in the world today, because almost all of them have some sort of thin film coating technologies that are being used on them, and which a huge chunk could be using Sono technology to apply those thin films. And so when I walk into an electronics store or walk into a medical device place in a hospital, I would like to be able to say, oh, these are all the products that I know Sonotech machines have coated. And it's not only brought a huge benefit for our stockholders, but it's brought a huge impact upon the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for joining me today, for giving our listeners and viewers an incredible deep dive into the business that is Sono-Tek. Really appreciate your time.
It's been fun. Thank you very much. Enjoyable conversation.